Good morning, club members. We digest world-class journalism and talk it through in plain English. Here are 5 stories worth your time. First, let's look at a hidden weakness in America's rapid expansion of AI data centers. The United States is pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into massive new computing hubs. These giant facilities require steady, clean electricity to keep thousands of sensitive computer chips running. Yet, an invisible threat from space could easily knock out that power grid. Solar storms frequently blast charged particles towards Earth and disturb our magnetic field. These disturbances induce strong electric currents in the Earth's crust. The currents flow directly into high-voltage transformers through their ground connections. Once inside, these currents disrupt smooth alternating current and create electrical noise. Engineers call this noise harmonic distortion, unwanted spikes that destabilize power equipment. In past tests by government laboratories, even small currents caused dramatic damage. A current of just 15 amperes created noise that surged downstream. Electrical distortion jumped from 1% at high voltage to 32% downstream. That distortion worsens right where end users and data centers draw their electricity. History shows how dangerous this sudden electrical noise can be for society. In 1989, a solar storm collapsed a regional grid in 92 seconds. 6 million people lost electricity in less than 2 minutes. Even without major storms, routine space weather causes constant low-level problems. Insurers estimate these minor disruptions cost the US economy $10 billion every year. Fortunately, an effective American technological solution already exists to stop this damage. Special blocking devices can prevent ground currents from entering high-voltage transformers. However, American power utilities have been very slow to adopt this protection. Meanwhile, China is actively installing clones of this exact technology across its grid. Chinese leaders realize that securing electrical power is vital for winning the AI competition. This delay leaves America with a clear and dangerous vulnerability. A single direct hit from a severe solar storm could paralyze American data centers. Federal leadership will be needed to force grid upgrades before the next major storm hits. Moving on from power grid safety, our second story turns to corporate money. Company bosses are starting to lose faith in artificial intelligence. For 3 years, businesses have poured billions of dollars into new digital tools. Board members expected quick cost savings and huge leaps in worker productivity. Instead, many corporate leaders face rapidly rising bills and very few clear results. Why are costs going up when individual AI tasks are getting cheaper? The unit price for processing data has fallen by 90% over 3 years. However, workers are relying on these software tools far more often every day. Because total usage has exploded, overall corporate AI spending has doubled since last year. American companies alone could spend $280 billion on AI this year. That huge investment would make sense if the technology delivered on its promises. Yet a recent study showed that 95% of corporate AI projects failed. Most trial programs simply failed to hit their financial or efficiency targets. At the same time, companies worry about protecting their proprietary data, secret business information built over decades. When a firm sends information to an outside AI system, it shares key commercial secrets. The AI developer might use those insights to build competing products of its own. Recently, a major AI firm launched a design tool that competed directly with its business partner. Beyond corporate boardrooms, public backlash against new infrastructure is also growing rapidly. Data centers need massive amounts of electricity and water to keep running. In July, New York became the first state to halt new data center construction. Local residents naturally worry about environmental damage and rising power bills. However, stopping construction creates a difficult dilemma for the national economy. The United States made a similar choice during the oil crises of the 1970s. Back then, political leaders delayed investing in domestic energy infrastructure to keep prices down. That decision failed to build long-term security and left the country vulnerable for decades. Now, business and political leaders face a delicate balancing act. They must control rising software costs without falling behind on key infrastructure. Slowing down today might protect profits, but it could cost them the future. Moving to our third topic, one Chinese city just hit the jackpot in chip making. While companies elsewhere worry about technology costs, the city of Hefei is celebrating. A decade ago, local officials tried a completely new strategy to grow their economy. Instead of giving traditional bank loans, they acted like venture capital investors. They used state funds to buy direct shares in promising young technology companies. Their biggest bet went to a computer memory startup named CXMT. That decision paid off immensely when the chipmaker went public on the stock market. Investors rushed to buy the new stock on its very first day of trading. The price of the shares soared by more than 400% in hours. That surge boosted the total value of the company to over 3 trillion yuan. The local government funds in Hefei still own nearly 30% of the firm. Their stake is now worth almost 1 trillion yuan. In Western currency, that comes to roughly $148 billion. For an initial investment made 3 years ago, they gained 50 times their money. It is the kind of return that would make top Silicon Valley investors envious. In China, this approach is now celebrated as the Hefei model. National leaders want other regional governments to follow this exact same blueprint. The goal is to build strong domestic supply chains and reduce reliance on foreign tech. Currently, 3 giant overseas companies control over 90% of global memory chips. CXMT now supplies about 8% of that massive international market. Its market share could grow as global electronics makers look for cheaper suppliers. Yet this single headline success hides a much bigger worry for the Chinese government. Regional administrations have created over 2,000 guidance funds to back local startups. These government vehicles have poured trillions of yuan into green energy, batteries, and chips. Because private capital has pulled back, the state now provides most early business funding. The hard truth is that very few startups become profitable giants like CXMT. Many state funds are now stuck with bad investments and no buyers in sight. Officials need dozens of massive hits just to break even on their losses elsewhere. Picking winners in high technology is rarely as easy as Hefei made it look. Moving on to our fourth story, we turn from Chinese tech to the Middle East. 5 months after a major air campaign began, a big question hangs over Washington. Why is Iran still launching precise missile strikes across the region? Back in late February, the US and Israel launched joint attacks against Iranian targets. Their primary goal was to destroy Iran's offensive missiles and production sites. American leaders believed hundreds of airstrikes would quickly neutralize the threat. Yet 5 months later, Iranian launch crews continue to strike targets with surprising accuracy. They have hit military barracks in Jordan and major bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. Other missiles have landed near installations in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. To understand how Iran sustained its missile power, we must look at how crews adapted. During the early weeks of fighting, coalition jets hunted missile launchers relentlessly. Attacking aircraft bombed the entrances of vast underground bases to trap equipment inside. Drones hovered overhead to destroy any launcher that dared to move into the open. However, Iranian military engineers quickly demonstrated a knack for recovery. They rapidly dug out buried tunnel entrances, allowing crews to bring launchers back outside. A temporary ceasefire in April gave these engineers valuable breathing room to work. Recent American strikes have focused mainly on southern Iran, leaving other areas quieter. At the same time, Israel stepped back from the latest round of active fighting. With less immediate pressure overhead, Iranian crews operated much more methodically. Changes in hardware also helped explain the sudden rise in missile accuracy. Earlier in the conflict, Iran fired older rockets based on legacy Soviet designs. Those older weapons were notoriously inaccurate and often missed their targets completely. Now, Iran is digging into its modern stockpiles of advanced guidance systems. Crews are also benefiting from tactical moves made early in the war. In the opening months, Iran targeted critical radar stations in neighboring countries. By damaging those early warning sites, Iran severely weakened the regional defense umbrella. Without clear tracking data, defending bases against incoming missiles became far harder. All of this leaves American military leaders with a severe strategic dilemma. Defending troops requires interceptors, expensive defensive missiles that shoot down incoming weapons. Coalition forces burned through huge numbers of interceptors during the initial campaign. These defensive weapons are extremely costly and take a long time to replace. If Iran continues its launches, American defense stockpiles could run dangerously low. To stop the threat, Washington may feel forced to expand its airstrikes significantly. That expansion could mean asking Israeli forces to rejoin the bombing campaign. Yet, escalating the attacks risks turning a fragile pause into a full-scale war. For now, leaders in Washington must choose between depleting their defenses or deepening the conflict. After looking at missile strength in Iran, we end today across the Pacific Ocean. For decades, America and Japan shared a very simple division of labor. Japan acted as the defensive shield, while America carried the offensive spear. Today, that traditional arrangement is changing very fast. Under Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, Tokyo is executing a historic pivot. Japan is now raising its defense budget toward 2% of gross domestic product. It is also lifting defense export rules and acquiring long-range missiles. These changes reveal that the security of both nations is now deeply intertwined. America cannot project power across the Pacific without its strong anchor in Tokyo. At the same time, Japan still relies on American security guarantees to stay safe. To build airtight deterrents, experts have outlined 6 key steps for the alliance. First, they recommend setting up a single permanent military command inside Japan. Fast threats like hypersonic missiles leave no time for back-channel phone calls during a crisis. This joint headquarters would also stop cyber attacks inside foreign networks before fighting begins. Second, the alliance wants to expand weapons production on Japanese soil. Factories in Japan could build advanced combat drones alongside defensive missiles. The Allies also plan to store fuel and ammunition across smaller Japanese islands. Third, the proposal opens private Japanese shipyards to American naval vessels. At present, damaged American warships must travel thousands of miles home for maintenance. Repairing combat ships directly in Japan would keep Allied forces ready for action. It would also take heavy pressure off backlogged shipyards inside the United States. Fourth, Washington must re-anchor its security promises as regional rivals expand their nuclear forces. Making all these steps work will require governments to remove old legal restrictions. Transforming an old defensive shield into a fully shared partnership is a massive effort. Yet both nations know that neither country can maintain peace in the region alone. That brings us to the very end of our World News Digest today. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to our next morning chat.